Hey guys, welcome back to Jess and Ray's Romance. I'm Jessin and I'm here with a bi-weekly wrap-up because I usually do weekly wrap-ups. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to film nowadays and I really do miss it. That's why I'm like super dressed up. I felt like getting really made up. It's October and I was feeling the red lip, so there we have it. That's why. Any excuse for a red lip, honestly. But I have a lot of books to go over at one time because this is 2 weeks worth of books that I've read for the month of October. I'm trying to play catch up. So let's start with the first one. I decided to kick off October with Archangels Son by Nalini Singh. I have not read this book yet. It came out last year. I want to say it came out last year. On the 26th, the next book in this series is coming out, Archangel's Light. I'm so excited about it because it's a couple that I've been anticipating forever and they're finally getting their HEA. So I was like, oh, well, I have to read the book that I have not read yet, which is Archangels Son, and this is about Titus. He's an archangel of Africa, and the thing about this is you cannot just read these. They don't stand up well as standalones because there's so much going on in the world. There's like war and disease and like zombie things that are happening right now, so you can't read it out of order. But this is an interesting romance because Titus is this archangel of Africa and he's very fearsome. He always like wears his like armor, which I really love this cover. Look at his wings. Anyway, I just like her covers. So he needs some help because his territory is being really overrun with the undead. I don't even know what they call them in this book. I kind of forgot. The Reborn, I forgot. Okay, so anyway, the Reborn are kind of overrunning his territory. And all the archangels are struggling. They don't have a lot of resources. So Shireen, which she has an interesting backstory. She's known in the angel community as the Hummingbird. She has these gorgeous paintings and sometimes they take her decades to do, and so a painting by the Hummingbird is so special, and she's one of the only angels that like everyone treats with respect and like nobody fucks with her because she's like a treasure. And she's had this trauma in her past where it makes her a little bit forgetful and not really grounded in reality. But recently she started to come back to herself, and so she's taking on some more responsibility, and we start to discover that Shireen, the Hummingbird, the way that she grew up, she wasn't this very fragile type of being. She was actually pretty fearsome, and so she's taking that back, and I really enjoyed reading about this type of character who everyone just expected to be coddled and she wanted to be treated like an adult. But it's kind of hard to ask people to change their hundreds of years of behavior towards you when that's just how they normally act and now they're expected to change. But anyway, she finds Titus to be very charming and very direct, and she appreciates that. And so she basically challenges him to treat her like a warrior, and it's a very interesting read. I will say it wasn't one of my favorites in the series. I feel like the chemistry between the characters could have used a little bit more work because a lot of the focus of these books, especially now, has a lot to do with the Reborn. What type of Reborn are these? What's changing? Why is the virus affecting certain beings that it normally didn't affect before? So there's just a lot of world stuff happening that technically wasn't super new material. I will say that. I don't think that it was very unique, the plot for this book. So for that reason, I gave this book 3.5 stars because I could see these characters together. I feel like they could have spent a lot more time building up that chemistry. There was hardly any subtlety to their relationship. It was almost like slow burn, slow burn, slow burn. You're waiting for like the little touches to like show you that these characters are interested in each other, and then all of a sudden it was just kind of like, I love you, and that didn't quite work for me. So 3.5 stars. Then I reread Captive of the Horror King by Zoe Draven. This is an alien romance that it also is very Game of Thrones like because these characters are similar to like the Dothraki, but they're aliens. And this was a reread we did it on the podcast by this time. I love this series so much. It's one of my favorite alien romance series, and I can't wait for the next book. But I've reviewed this book a ton of times, so I'm just not going to focus on it since I have other books to talk about. Then I started reading Serena Ackroyd's Jace Ventura series, and the first one's called Ghost Whisperer. So these are actually novellas. All three of the books are novellas. And if you're a fan of the Charlie Davidson series, this has some similarities. So Jace is psychic, and she can see ghosts. But in her world, ghosts aren't like super friendly or helpful. They might have unfinished business, but they're not kind of looking to resolve that. But she tries her best, and she actually doesn't even charge any of her clients. They just kind of gift her stuff. So she's been very lucky because she has a penthouse that overlooks Central Park in New York. Well, there's this one guy that comes to her for help. His name is Drake, and his nephew OD'd at a party, and he doesn't think that his nephew did this. He thinks that there's foul play. So she seeks out the ghost of his nephew and finds out that it was foul play, that one of his classmates actually slipped him drugs and killed him. And so this whole situation brings our two main characters together, Drake, who is looking to help his nephew in the afterlife, and Jace. So it's a very slow and sweet type of thing, because they just at the end of Ghost Whisperers start kind of dating. They have like their first kiss and stuff. So very low steam. Also, I will say, and this is kind of a spoiler-ish thing, the nephew's killer is not brought to justice in this book, and I was kind of a little disappointed in that. It was just kind of like, oh, he's too powerful. His family has too much money and influence, and even if I plant those seeds that, you know, your nephew's ghost says so-and-so, Nathan, murdered him, then there's no real evidence, you know? So it was kind of a little bit disappointing. And his nephew is not crossing over, he's staying. And he's kind of like attached to Jace now, so he hangs around her apartment. So he's just like a fixture. He's just a fixture in their lives now. And so anyway, Drake and Jace start dating. The next book, Ghost Avenger, Jace gets a call from this actress who has left the spotlight for 10 years. Like, nobody has seen this actress. And so she's like, oh my God, she used to be one of my favorite actresses, and she needs my help. She wants to fly me in a private jet to this undisclosed location. Okay, so she decides to go there, and she finds out that this actress wants help because she thinks that a ghost is following her. And she's like, yep, there's a little boy following you. And apparently this actress had a son who died young. And she feels like she wants to put her son to rest, bring him some peace. And Jace decides to bring in her boyfriend Drake, who is a psychologist. I can't remember if he is a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I can't remember. But anyway, she's like, let me call my partner, and he's gonna come over and help you because you are not okay. You've been in this mansion alone for a decade, and you need to move on with your life too. So finally we get some steam between Jace and Drake, but it's like one explicit scene, and then that case is resolved. So at least that case gets resolved, and I was satisfied with that. So I liked Ghost Avenger slightly more than Ghost Whisperer, but they're both on the 4-star scale, because I just wanted more from them. They are novellas, so it's a little bit hard to satisfy with novellas. And then I was really thinking that the last book, Ghost Hunter, was possibly going to circle back to Drake's nephew, because he's still hanging around. His killer is still on the loose, just thriving. You know, I thought maybe we would have that as like a little wrap up to the trilogy, but no, it's just another case. This guy is like a treasure hunter, and then he has this Native American ghost following him because apparently he has disturbed Native American burial grounds, and this ghost of this chief has more powers than normal ghosts do, and he's out for revenge. And Jace kind of gets wrapped up into that. So that case is resolved. But the nephew's case is not resolved. I was so disappointed in that. And I don't know. I also was a little bit annoyed because this is the third book in the series that Drake and Jace are together, and Drake always has to bring up the age gap between him and Jace. And every time she like leans on him, tells him about her day, what she's struggling with, he's like, is she looking at me like a father figure? So I'm like, why are you even bringing this up? Like, y'all are together, y'all are living together. It's just, it was slightly weird. So I like this book a little bit less, and I gave this book 3.5 stars. Then I read The Duke by Catherine Ashe, and this is the third book in her Devil's Duke series, but this one can be read as a standalone. This was a recommendation by Crystal. I really, like, one of my favorite parts about this book is the opening and how the characters meet each other. So Amarantha, she has a loving family, and she really wants to get married. So she kind of attaches herself to this vicar, and he wants to be a missionary, so he goes to Jamaica because he's going to be a missionary in Jamaica. So she decides to travel with him. They're not married yet, and she has like a chaperone with her. She thinks that she would make a really good missionary's wife. You start to get hints that her betrothed is just, they don't see eye to eye on certain situations, the way that he treats the locals in Jamaica, and he thinks that their spirituality is more important than their actual safety. There's a situation there. But then a hurricane comes, and she actually gets stuck in this building because like there's no really pre-warning for hurricanes back then, and she gets stuck with this other soldier, okay, this Navy man, and they're in this building, and they have such a sweet interaction because they're stuck in this outhouse. they might die. They just kind of get to talking and really kind of bond and connect. And it's so sweet because she falls asleep on his shoulder and like they're holding hands. And so you just can tell that there's this spark, there's this connection and stuff. But as soon as the hurricane is done, there's work to be done on the island. There's cleanup. There are people that are hurt. And I really love how Amarantha is like, I can't just sit in the hotel while people are suffering outside. Her chaperone's just like, no, stay here. Like, your betrothed wants you to stay here and you have to listen to him. And she's like, actually, no. So she goes outside and she goes to this doctor who he's attending the locals who are hurt and need medication. They need attention. And she actually becomes this kind of nurse in training. And she's very worried. And like her betrothed is like, I can't believe you're like getting all dirty and you should be up in your room, like propping your feet up. And she's like, I can't relax while people are suffering. So again, tension between her and her betrothed. And then she meets her sailor again, her Navy man. And Gabriel he has a new commission, so he's gonna be the captain of a ship and he has to leave soon, but he sees Amarantha again and knows that he wants her. So he does pursue her and she's like, no, I'm like kind of engaged. And he's like, but you're not married and I don't think you're gonna marry him. I think you and I have something special. So I loved all the scenes that happened in Jamaica. This book does take on like an epic romance format. So there are years in between where they don't see each other because there's stuff that happens. He has to leave. He has to leave and sail away because it's a commission. Like, you cannot say, no, I don't feel like going. Like, maybe later. Call me back in a couple months. It's like the king is giving you an order. Like, this is your job. Like, go do it. So he has to leave her. And there's situations where she thinks that he died, but he did not. And so years pass and they end up by running into each other again. There's sort of like a mystery that's going on in the background. Gabriel now has like this reputation. He was third in line to the dukedom and now he is a duke and he's like a recluse and he has this reputation that he's cultivating on purpose. So there's lots of tension between Amarantha and Gabriel because of their past, because she believes stuff about him that she was misinformed. So it's very angsty. Sometimes I could get really frustrated, but honestly, their chemistry was really good when they were on the same page. I loved it. The way that Catherine Ashe was writing this connection, this intimacy between them, I love that so much. But yeah, the angst is a little bit too much for me, so I only gave this book 4 stars. Sorry, my camera might have moved because my battery was dying. Next, I have Walking in a Witchy Wonderland, which is an anthology in the Stay a Spell world by Juliet Cross, and you should read this book after you read the 3rd book, Witches Get Stitches. So they have individuals, stories about different couples in this anthology. The first book focuses on Evie and Mateo. Then we have a short with Isadora and Dev. And then we have some side characters that get their HEA. JJ is the bartender at the Cauldron, where the Savoy sisters all hang out. And he has a best friend. So this is a best friends to lovers MM romance between JJ and Charlie. And I freaking love that one so much. And finally, the final story in this anthology is actually a preview of the 4th book, Always Practice Safe Hex. So Livy, who is a Savoy sister, you get to see who her hero is, a little preview in this book. And I will say he is a Grimm, someone who you haven't met before in the series. So this was very enjoyable. I obviously am biased, and so yeah, I love it. She's my aunt. I love her. So then next I reread Unhinged by Onley James. This is like a perfect October read, this series. There's only 2 out right now, and we reviewed it on the podcast, so this was a reread for me, and I just read it like a couple weeks ago, but it was still great. It was still amazing. It was still a 5-star book. Probably one of my favorite MM romances too, and the hero is a serial killer, and his love interest is the son of one of his victims that he killed like 8 years ago. So yeah, it's awesome. And if you haven't read these books, you totally should. Okay, the next book that I read was actually part of my September TBR that I never actually got to, and I decided I want to read this. I feel in the mood for it, and Anyplay has the audio. No, it wasn't from Anyplay. I lied. It was on Audible Plus, actually. So I listened to Captain Jack's Woman by Stephanie Lawrence. This is a prequel novel to her Bastion Club series. I have no idea how it like ties into the Bastion Club. I haven't read them yet. I want to. The premise of the story is The heroine, Catherine, she used to live with her grandfather, and there was some situation where her aunts, because she's like an orphan, where her aunts wanted her to make her debut. So she's been living with them for the past 6 years or so in London. And finally, since she hasn't been doing well in her season, her aunts kind of like washed their hands of her, sent her back to live with her grandfather. And this is where she wants to be. It's on the coast. She kind of can run wild like she always used to do as a child. And she gets kind of embroiled in this smuggling ring. The local fishermen need to supplement their income, and so they're smuggling in this lace, and she likes to dress as a boy whenever she goes riding. So when they see Catherine, they assume that she's a boy, and she is really savvy, and so they're like, hey, you're going to be our leader. So she becomes this leader of the smuggling ring. And then we have our hero, Jack, Captain Jack. He hasn't been home in about 10 years. He's actually a lord. But whenever he comes back home, he is in his, captain persona. And he runs into the smuggling ring. And I love their first meeting because he sees their leader, Kit, and they actually have a little sword fight. And he's like, why am I attracted to this boy, Kit? And it's a girl, Catherine. They have this kind of secretive romance once he figures out that Kit is actually Catherine. He assumes that she's just a byblow of like a local gentry and doesn't really ask her. So he does not know that she is the legitimate daughter. She's a virgin, and he, they start a romance, and she wants it. And I love their romance in the beginning. Unfortunately, everything that I loved about the beginning of the book, the way that Jack was treating Kit, not really blinking an eye that she dressed like a boy and was involved with the smuggling ring, he kind of liked that about her, liked her spiritedness. But once, and this is a slight spoiler, once he finds out who she is, that she is the daughter of a respectable gentleman, and somebody that he should marry because he is Lord John Hendon or something like that. I forgot what his actual title is. And once he's like, oh, well, you're the marrying type, I have to marry you. Pretty much, I'm going to force you to marry me, and I expect you to behave like a gently bred lady and stop going riding and stop wearing boys' clothes and don't be involved with the smuggling ring that you've been involved with for half the book. Like now, just like sit home like a good little wife or wife-to-be. And I hated that. I absolutely hated it. I feel like his character did kind of an about face. He was already a little bit of an alpha hole in the beginning, but it was slightly charming. But then he just turned into an absolute asshole, and he never really apologizes for his behavior. Never really says, like, I'm sorry for trying to change you or anything. It just like, yep, they roll with it and have it happily ever after. I was mad at this. So this book got 3 stars. So sad. That was disappointing, and it kind of makes me not want to read the Bastion Club series. And I really love the Sinsters, and the Sinsters are these alpha heroes, but done well. And I was expecting that for this series. Then I read Rain by Jessica Gaziella, and this is a new to me author, and she's been suggested multiple times because I've gone on record saying I don't love MC romances. The MC culture is not for me. I don't like the way that they talk about women. I really could care less about running guns and drugs and all that jazz. Like, I don't care. And I don't care for like the typical biker speak that for some reason authors feel like they have to have their characters talk like this. But luckily, that's really pretty absent in this book. The heroine Summer was actually a captive of this notorious gangster named V, and he's in the skin trade. So one night there's a hurricane. The guards are not as vigilant, and she's able to escape this compound that nobody escapes. She commandeers a car, and she ends up by wrecking, and this guy on this motorcycle sees her wreck, like in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a hurricane, and he's like, honey, what are you doing? And he ends up by taking her to safety to his house. She's been malnourished, she's been ill-treated, abused, and he starts taking care of her. And Rain is the president of the local MC, the Henchmen. And I think the reason why this book really worked for me is because the majority of the book happens at his house. It takes place at his house, and he is being such a caregiver towards Summer. He automatically knows that something's not right, even whenever it's very clear that he's getting himself involved with V, who is a player that he doesn't want to get on the bad side of. He still helps her anyway. I just love it because he's so loving. He cooks for her, he takes care of her, and it's just so sweet, and I loved it. So I give this book like 4.5 stars. 4 stars. It's in between. It's like a 4.25. I really loved it. Okay, so this was like a mood read one. I decided to pick up Angelica Lane by Bryn Asher. It's the 3rd book in the Carpino series, but they're all standalones from what I understand because it's all siblings. And I saw Steph, Virgo reader, say that she really loved this book. Like this was her favorite by Bryn Asher that she's read. So I was feeling like a sports romance and I saw that this was a single dad romance. And I'm a sucker for those. I just gravitate towards them. I don't know why, I just do. Again, this book had such a great opening, just like Captain Jack's Woman. This book had such a great opening. I thought that the characters' chemistry was so good, and I feel like halfway through the book, it just spiraled, and I did not like it at all. The characters made some choices that I was not on board with. But the way that the book starts is so awesome. It's a little bit of an enemies to lovers. Paige and Cam have a run-in, literally. They run into each other and he spills like Coke all over her. She's very sassy to him and like hops in her car. Then Paige is supposed to be babysitting her niece and nephew while her sister and her husband go on a little vacation, and they're in summer camp right now, so one of the things that she has to do is go pick them up. And she also needs to pick up the neighbor's kids. Her sister's neighbor has 2 kids, and Paige needs to pick them up too, so 4 kids in total. She picks all of them up. She loves cooking. She has like this blog and this catering system that just like is starting to take off. And she's the baby of the family, so she's been really like kind of coddled and she wants to be taken seriously, and she's trying to build her business, you know, from scratch. Then when the neighbor comes to pick up his kids, guess who it is? It's Cam, the guy who ran into her. And he's like, you won't be picking up my kids anymore, like absolutely not. And so they're butting heads, but there's a sexual tension that is just so palpable. And I was like, oh, I love it. I love it. But halfway through the book, when they kind of get on the same page, I feel like there was such a tonal shift. The pacing was so off with this book. It was like the first half of the book was very focused on Paige and Cam and their enemies to lovers start. And once that was resolved, once they were no longer being like, oh my gosh, you're my enemy and stuff like that, then I feel like the author's like, oh, I need a new conflict. And there was like 3 villains that kind of popped up. One was Cam is a football coach. He also has a small gym where he trains athletes. The quarterback was benched and he wasn't happy about it, so he kind of becomes like this minor villain that he could have totally just been cut out of the book. We don't care about him. He wasn't a big deal. Cam also has this bitter ex who is a horrible mother. He actually has custody of the kids and they just go visit their mom. Brittany, I believe her name is. Is her name Brittany? Becca? Betty? Oh my gosh. Becky. Bekki. Bitter ex. We have her. And she's a classic bitter ex. She cares about her appearance. She doesn't care about her kids. She like doesn't want Cam to be dating anybody else, hates Paige on sight, all that jazz. And then I'm going to talk about a spoiler because this is actually kind of the main villain and the conflict that we deal with at the end. In the beginning, Paige has this friend named Brian. And the thing about Paige is she doesn't have any friends except Brian and her family. So like she's close with her siblings, and then she has her friend Brian, who she's been knowing since college. So they've been friends for years. And she knows that Brian kind of wants more with her, wants to be not in the friend zone, wants to date her. Once she starts dating Cam, he starts being weird and unreasonable. And the author made the choice to make Brian's character not only just kind of like a jealous friend who wanted more with the heroine, all of a sudden he becomes psychotic. He becomes a stalker. He's stalking Paige. He does some really effed up things, like break into her apartment while she's like staying with Cam and stealing her underwear, doing gross things. And like this is somebody that she's been knowing for years. And it just felt like his character was one thing and then became something else when the author needed a conflict. I also really didn't love, at the end we find out that apparently Brian is bipolar. His father was bipolar. But the author also makes a comment saying, like, the police get in his apartment. They see that Brian has a wall full of pictures of Paige and also Cam and his kids. And the detective makes a comment being like, oh, he's probably OCD because we see this a lot, like this obsession. And I'm like, that's not what OCD is. OCD isn't, oh, I'm obsessed with this person and stalking them, so I have OCD. And that was a really weird, like, if you're gonna make a medical diagnosis in a book, make sure it's accurate. I don't know. It was just weird. I didn't like it. There was also a big no-no for me where the hero pushes the heroine away. Cam's like, I can't give you this really big thing that's a really big relationship thing. Well, I'm talking spoilers right now, so I'll just say it. They dated. He basically moved her in, introduced her as his girlfriend to his kids. His kids got super attached to her. Introduced her to his family in Texas. Like, let's take a road trip with the kids. You'll meet my parents. Like, he is giving all the signs of this is forever. We are in a solid, committed relationship and I want forever with you. Then after the visit with his parents, Paige realizes that he made an offhanded comment saying he doesn't want any more kids besides his 2 kids. And Paige is like, we need to talk about this because I do want kids. And Cam shuts their whole relationship down after this, saying like, oh, well, that's something that I can never give you. So like, I knew I shouldn't even started a relationship with you in the first place. So that's my B. But like, you need to go find, literally tells her, you need to go find a man who can give you kids because that's not me. That's never going to be me. So like, this is the end. Okay. Point blank. So Paige, you know, she's depressed about it and he gets invited to Paige's sister's house because their kid is having a birthday. And when Cam sees Paige at the party with Brian, her friend, who Cam's always been like, he is a thing for you, and Paige is just like, oh my god, no. That was stupid. I didn't like that. Her reaction to all that. Her obliviousness to her friend being like, he would never ever do that. Like, I understand to an extent, but also he was being really weird and she should have picked up on it. Anyway, so Cam sees Brian, freaks out, manhandles Paige, slams her against the wall, fucks her without a condom, of course, and then just changes his mind, being like, I can't see you with another guy. I will give you what you want. You want 5 kids? We'll have 5 kids. And I'm just like, that's weird. That's a weird choice. I just feel like something as big as I don't want kids and I want kids, it's such a conflict that I feel like if you're gonna change your mind on that, it's gonna be a gradual thing. You might need to sit with it for a while and imagine yourself like as a person with more kids when you thought that this was it. I don't know. If you were that adamant enough to cut off this relationship that you were like, this is forever, but like, oh no, gotta stop it in its tracks because you want kids and that's something that I will never give you, so like, goodbye. Cut you out of my life completely. It feels like a weird about face to be like, never mind, I changed my mind. We can have a lot of kids now. It was weird, and I don't think that I hate that as a conflict. Kids are a thing that you either agree on or you don't agree on, and you shouldn't convince somebody who does not want kids to have kids, and you shouldn't convince somebody who wants kids that it's okay to do without. That's a personal choice, and if you want to change your mind on your own, that's one thing, but it just felt weird for me. I gave this book 3 stars. I was pretty mad at it, honestly. Then I read the next book in the Henchmen series by Jessica Gaziella, Cash. And Cash is actually the brother of Rain, our hero. And we meet him and he's like a charming kind of Lothario. He loves women. And the heroine is this really badass girl. Her name's Lo, and there's this big like explosion that happens in the beginning. A lot of players in this town are like scrambling around. Lo goes to a safe house and is attacked by this man. And all we know about this man is that this is somebody who she's been running from for a while. And she needs a safe place, and Cash actually ends up by running into her. And they've kind of butted heads, but there's a lot of sexual tension underlying it. And again, the reason why this book really worked for me is because these characters, these heroes, are honestly such good caregivers. So Cash takes care of Lo while she is beaten and bruised up and just not okay. And I love seeing this badass dude just be really sweet to her and also respect her too, because she is a person that can take care of herself, but right now she just needs help. So I really liked it. I think that the conflict and the like reveal for like the villain, like who the villain is to Lo, I thought that all worked really well. So I gave this book 4 stars. All right, now here's a big one. I read Hollow Heathens by Nicole Fiorina, and this is the first book that I've ever read by her. I haven't read anything else, and it's the first book in the Tales of Weeping Hollow series. It follows the heroine Fallon. She's traveling to this town, Weeping Hollow, and I just feel like the author really didn't do a good job with world building, and also I was having a hard time getting into this book. It took me almost an entire day to get 8% in because I don't feel like chapter 1 was a very compelling chapter. The stuff that was happening right off the bat was Fallon in a convenience store looking at her reflection, talking about how ghostly her appearance looks, talking about this doppelganger thing. Like, she was just being very metaphorical. And I feel like sometimes when an author is trying to be like really poetic, it feels like they're really trying hard. It becomes purple prose, and I just don't care. I'm like, I need to know about this character. Who is she? Where's she going? What is she doing? Give me some background on her. And I feel like we don't get to know Fallon for a while, and random things are just thrown out about her. Like, she's a mortician. That could have been like mentioned in the beginning. A little bit spoilery, so I will throw up a spoiler thing. It's not until well into the book that it's even mentioned that Fallon can see ghosts. I think that should have been mentioned much earlier than it was. And her seeing ghosts is almost a convenient plot device. She only sees ghosts when it's convenient to the plot, when it furthers the story. Otherwise, she doesn't see ghosts. So it was just a weird mix of, this book has so much potential because this town was really interesting, Weeping Hollow. It was full of these witches. And that was another thing too. When she gets to this town, everyone's pretty open about, there's 2 covens that live in this town, and there's some weird supernatural things that happen. Fallon just accepts it, but her background, like knowing where she came from, who her father is, weird things that Fallon, her character, has experienced as a young girl, like that all could have been told in the beginning, so that I can be like, oh, it makes sense that Fallon would accept this town and that there's covens and stuff like that. It was just a strange layout to this story. The biggest appeal to Hollow Heathens for me were the actual Hollow Heathens. So this is this group of men. They wear masks around town. And she finds out from her friend that they have a curse on them, and you cannot look at their face without seeing your worst fear imaginable, and people die if they see their faces. Fallon is almost immediately obsessed with one of the Hollow Heathens. She sees him like on her second day in Weeping Hollow. His name's Julian, and I will say the mystery about the Hollow Heathens really kept me invested in the book. Unfortunately, I don't think that the author did enough with them. They're supposed to be like this fearsome group that have these almost uncontrollable powers, but I feel like nothing was really explained about exactly what their powers do. Like, we have the typical like telekinesis and influencing type of thing, and oh, I have dark blood in me, but it's not really explained. And also, they're members of a coven. They have like a coven leader, and the way that the coven leader treats them, it makes them feel a little bit less badass, because they're supposed to be these feared guys and they're just letting this other stupid dude walk all over them. There's just a lot about this book that really kind of disappointed me. The ending of this book was quite cliche. I didn't like how the conflict was resolved at the end. I was like, ooh, it feels a little bit, I don't know. This book felt a lot more YA, and the characters are 25, 24. I think Fallon's 24 or 25 and 28. Like, they're not young children. Also, Fallon barely ever went into work. She was always off, always going to the beach, always getting coffees all the time. It was just a weird town, man. Nobody ever worked. Julian didn't work either. He was supposed to like be a mechanic, but like he never. There was one scene where a guy was like, where's my car? That was it. So yeah, that book was not good. 3 stars. Then I picked up The Harp of Kings by Juliette Maurier. This is technically not a romance, but I really love Juliette Maurier, and I felt like it's been so long since I picked up a book that I have not read yet by her. She has a Blackthorn and Grimm series, which has tie-ins to this one, I discovered as I was reading it, but you can read this book without reading the other one. It's fine. And it's been a while since I've read Juliette Maurier. She did have a stint in YA. So the books that I've read by her are your kind of classical historical fantasies with a nice romance through line that I really have always enjoyed. I feel like her writing has changed a little bit since she's done YA. I didn't read her YA books. I wasn't interested in YA, but I feel like her language is a little bit less formal in this one, which honestly, it was something that I enjoyed. I kind of expect my fantasies to have a little bit more formal language, and the characters kind of said stuff that felt a little anachronistic, because even though this does have fantasy elements in it, there are like the Fae. It's set in Ireland in the 600s, so this is like early medieval period. This is like the Dark Ages, okay? This is a real setting. So when the characters are saying, you catch my drift, that's a very modern thing to say. Also, the characters are cursing, saying like shit, which she never did that before in her books. So it was just a little kind of jarring. But I still enjoyed this premise. The heroine Levon, she is on this island called Swan Island, and this is where they train warriors, and she's kind of like an apprentice. You have a trial run. So she and her brother Brock have come to this island hoping to be accepted as actual warriors. And these warriors are very in demand. Kings hire them to do jobs, go undercover. They're very good with disguising themselves, taking on an identity. And she also has this rival named Dao. They're both competitive because they're like the top two people on this island that the instructors are looking at of maybe we'll let them join us. So there's a lot of competitiveness going on with Levon and Dao. Well, all three of them get tapped for this mission. Like, you're not accepted as a warrior yet, but this could be like basically your make or break assignment. We want you to assume an identity. We're gonna go to this court because this ceremonial harp, which was said to be like blessed by the Fae and everything, has gone missing. The like crown prince needs this for the ceremony where he's gonna be crowned king. So he doesn't know about it, and our task is to find it. Who stole it? Is this sabotage? What's happening? Because it's not, there are factions that don't want him to be king. So I really love the way that Juliette Marie has these characters assume a role that they very much do not. It's like the opposite of what they want to do. Levon is a very tough girl. Like, she doesn't want to be seen as a girly girl, and she needs to assume the identity of this girl named Sierra who plays the harp and the flute, which she actually is really quite good musically. Her and her brother are musical. Brock, he gets the easy assignment. He just plays a harpist, and he is a harpist. But Levon has to, kind of like a damsel in distress role. So anytime they're attacked, Levon can't show that she's actually trained. She has to act like a girl would. So that's really hard for her. Dao's assignment is a mute stable hand. And there's things that happen in Dao's past where one of his biggest things is he never wants to be seen as foolish. He wants to be taken seriously. He wants to prove himself. And so having to assume this role where he can't be as involved as he wants to be, and he can't communicate as well as he is used to communicating, it's very hard for him to assume this role. And I really like how that like challenges them. So I just really enjoyed this book a lot. I believe, even though we don't get a ton of point of view from Brock, which is Levon's brother, this book focuses a lot on a journey that he's going on. And I'm pretty sure that Juliette Marie is going to have a romance develop between Levon and Dao. But this is a trilogy, and I'm not quite sure that they're going to end up together, but I have a feeling that they will. And they kind of learn to respect each other during the course of this assignment, and I just think that a romance would be beautiful. So I'm very excited to read the second book in the series. I gave this book 4 stars. All right, still going. I told you guys that I have quite a few books to talk about. Then I have Big Bad Wolf by Jenica Snow. This is the first book in her Lycan series, and this is a novella. It was a pretty quick read. The heroine Michalina has decided to just kind of like drop everything in her life to travel Europe. Her parents are just like, you're crazy. So she just goes to Europe, and she's been going country to country, just seeing the sights, enjoying herself. And her last stop is Romania. So she goes to like a little small town, and she rents this cottage, and there's these stories about the woods like behind her cottage. And there's an old woman who she's renting the cottage from, and she actually has a house right next door. And the old woman wants to tell her like there are lichens in the forest, and her grandson is telling her and be like, it's just superstitious stuff, but the woman like really believes it. And then we get to the point of view of our hero Ren, and he's a lichen. I think he's 300 years old, and he's been searching for his mate. He's despairing that he'll never find her, and of course it's Michalina. So it's a very short, fast, steamy read that I really did enjoy. Nothing super special about these lichens or anything, just a run-of-the-mill fated mate situation. They meet each other, they're immediately attracted to each other, and it was just a really fast read, so I gave it 3.5 stars. Okay, so I put The Nightmare on my TBR by Regine Abel because it was one of the books that was recommended a couple months ago when we did our Patreon monster themed romance that we reviewed together. I saw The Nightmare and I was like, I kind of really want to read this. I've been into monster romances, but it's the second book in a series in the Mist or whatever. So I decided to pick up the first book, which is The Mist Walker. So this is kind of, it's not post-apocalyptic, but the world is the same except for every couple of months for 3 days, there's this mist that appears, and everyone has to basically go on lockdown in their house. You can't let the mist into your house. Our heroine, Jade, she has a younger sister who is going to med school, and she's home during the mist. She decides to visit her sister. She asks her sister, please go check all the windows, and her sister's like, we double checked them like already. This is ridiculous. Everything's fine. Well, it's not fine because one of the windows was left cracked. So when her sister screams for her, Jade goes upstairs and she's freaking out because there's a mist walker right outside the window staring at her. And he actually gets his hand in the window before they're able to close it. So it like severs his mist hand, but it grabs Jade. And so now Jade feels the mist walker inside of her, and now she's branded. She doesn't know what this means because after the mist dissipates, they have to go back to their realm. It's almost like a tear in the fabric of like dimensions has opened Earth to another dimension, and that's where the mist walkers come from. There's also like mist beasts. There's a bunch of creatures. Some of them are really bad. Some of them are not that bad at all, but the humans don't know it, which are the mist walkers. And the mist walkers are actually looking for their fated mates. And our hero, Kazan, is a mist walker, but he can assume a human body, a physical body. And this actually wasn't mentioned until quite far into the book, which I felt like should have been mentioned earlier. He is actually a culmination of Jade, the heroine's wishes. When she was young, she imagined, a prince to take her away. And so his personality is like an evolution of her wishes. So the human body that he assumes is actually something that she dreamed up. He's like a 6'7", super, like he looks like what he looks like on the cover. 6'7", dark haired, leather wearing, black jeans wearing, just kind of like dangerous looking romance hero. Okay. And he actually bumps into Jade in his human form, and he starts courting her, but doesn't say, I'm a mistwalker. I'm the mistwalker who has branded you because you're my mate. So they have like a slow burn relationship. So there is that part of him that's keeping the truth from Jade, but he's hoping that she'll fall in love with him as a human and then not mind so much that he's a mistwalker. I think that a little bit more could have been done with the lore of this world, like explaining the mist beasts versus the nightmares versus the mistwalkers, who are technically wishes, and nightmares are exactly what you think about. They're a person's nightmares. I think a lot could have been done in the beginning, but I really did enjoy the relationship. It was nice and steamy and hot. And finally, I reread The Dark Highlander by Karen Marie Moning. We had a last minute switch up. I originally was going to review A Kiss of Fate by Mary Jo Putney on the podcast because it's a historical romance that has some fantasy elements. Unfortunately, when I looked on Amazon, there was no ebook, and I was just going off of, I have this book physically, I have the paperback, and I was gonna listen to it on AnyPlay. But I feel like a lot of people consume ebooks, and it's the most easily accessible form of a book, and I was like, we have to change it to something that most people can go pick up. So I decided to do The Dark Highlander, which has a little bit of historical in it because there's time travel to medieval Scotland, and a little bit of supernatural because the hero is a druid. He's possessed by these dark druids because he broke like the compact and stuff, and it just felt like an appropriate read for October. So I was satisfied with that. It's a 5-star read. I really do like Karen Marie Moning's Highlander series. It's different from her Fever series. These are all standalone romances that the characters get their HEA. And the Fever series follows heroine, and she's the heroine of every single book. There is a romance, but it doesn't actually develop until much later in the series. So she has something for everybody. All right, those are all the books that I read for the first half of October. I feel like I've been talking for a very long time. This video is probably going to be long. Sorry about that, but I don't always have time to sit and do videos and edit them and stuff. So today I had time. I'm really glad that I was able to talk about the books that I've been reading. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, life's better with little HEA. Bye guys.